There's a number of great apps that can help you develop your theory knowledge, as well as your ear training and rhythmic accuracy. And it's been quite a while since we've talked about them. So let's discuss. Welcome to Music Student 101. And now, your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Jeremy, what's up?
You teach college students about music, don't you?
Nominally, yeah.
Not just theory, but ear training, yes?
Ear training, yes. It's one of the classes I teach every semester.
And am I understanding correctly that we are in the midst of a new semester currently?
Well, we're in summer at the moment, so it's kind of a lazy, slow, chill semester, but technically a semester, yeah.
So this episode will come out before, at least sometime before the new bigger semester.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe this will help some of our students, and then also anyone else who's interested in training their ears and learning more about that kind of thing.
I certainly hope so.
You know, back in August of 2016, we released an episode, number 4, mind you.
Number 4.
On ear training tips.
You know that's 2016. That was 9 years ago.
Yep.
It's going to be 10 years next year.
Yeah.
Wow.
It'll be July, May. I think it'll be July of this year or next year. That'll be 10 years.
It'll be 10 years. Wow.
You know, we did some ear training tips and just kind of talked about that, but we also talked about ear training apps, you know.
Yes.
Some which are still alive and kicking, and some have kicked the bucket.
And some have kicked the bucket. And we talked about those apps sort of as an addendum to that episode, if I remember correctly, right? So most of the episode was just about sort of ear training and ear training tips. And then at the end, it's like, well, if you want further help, here are some apps.
Yeah, because, I mean, since then, I'm sure there's been a few more good ones. And, you know, so in this episode, we're going to talk about what's new and what's changed.
I can't wait.
Then. But first, let's have a little fun with our listeners, shall we?
Let's do that.
We got ourselves a new review.
New review. So, 5 stars from Huffin' Propane. Nice.
P-A-Y-N-E, which is...
P-A-Y-N-E. And they say, originally found this podcast in the fall due to getting turntables and wanting to learn more about music theory. 6 months later, all caught up on the episodes, and I'm learning to sight read on bass.
Ooh.
Oh, that's excellent. All caught up. That's actually an achievement, I think. To have almost 10 years of podcast episodes, to be all caught up with all of them.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we should have an achievement badge or something for that. And learning to sight read on bass. That's also awesome. They continue, great podcast that you can feel Jeremy and Matt's passion in every episode.
Very nice, huh?
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've mentioned before, we do take donations and Patreon patrons, but if you're just looking for ways to support us...
A new review is very nice.
It's very nice.
Just say, hey, good job. It helps. It boosts our egos.
It boosts our egos and our presence.
And it also boosts our visibility.
Yeah. So thanks again for that new review, Huffin' Propane.
Huffin' Propane. Excellent.
Now we have a new Patreon patron, and I got to say, I gotten to be a bit of a fanboy of this woman over here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, this is Diana Hoskins out of Huntsville, Alabama. Not too far from where we are.
Not far at all.
Diana is a 64-year-old drummer who has decided to learn piano and dig a little deeper into music theory.
Nice. Very nice.
What does she have to say, Matt?
Diana says, I just discovered your podcast last night and have already devoured episodes 1 through 4.
Hey, she's caught up on
There you go. Yeah.
ear training.
I had to laugh when you said musicians only needed to know how to count to 4. Even some of us drummers can count to 7. Mm-hmm. Well, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, right?
That's right. You know, just break it up.
Anyway, I created this big chart, and in one of the things on it was the circle of fifths. Mm-hmm. I had been struggling with it, and also with why I needed to know the order of sharps and flats. Well, I just listened to episode 5 on major chords and key signatures, and boom, it all fell into place after listening to the show, especially about the tips to determine what key signature you are in. I can't thank you enough, and I really look forward to the next hundreds of episodes that you've already done. I'm taking it slow, but I know your podcast is really going to help me. Anyway, this one drummer thanks you from the bottom of her heart. Well, we thank you, Diana, for the kind words and for your support on Patreon and your listening. We always say to go as slow as you need.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the great things about a podcast, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
when you're teaching a class, I try to be patient and I try not to stack too much stuff into one lecture, but at the bottom of the line, there's a pace there, right? You have to jump in and hang on.
You're on a schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, you're on a schedule.
A deadline.
Yeah, but with this podcast, you can listen to an episode 2 or 3 times if you feel it's helpful, right? Before you move on.
Absolutely.
Take it as slow as you want. And that Circle of Fifths one is a good one.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's one of those things that seem like magic until you really understand it. The Circle of Fifths.
That's the one we get the most feedback on, where everyone says they had their aha moment was the Circle of Fifths episode.
Yeah. It's a good one. It's a good one.
Well, in closing, Diana wanted to share a mnemonic device. We always welcome those.
Oh, we love those.
So her one for the Order of Sharps is fat cats get drunk at every bar.
At every bar. Nice.
There's always drunkenness involved in these things. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Fat cows get drunk after breakfast?
Yeah.
After every breakfast?
After eating breakfast.
Eating breakfast, yeah, okay.
That was one of mine.
That's a good one. And then for the Order of Flats, she just uses bead and then 3 not so nice words that she refuses to share with us. Diana has reached out to us with graciousness and kind words. She's given us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast.
Wonderful.
And she now supports us on Patreon, so I reckon a little reciprocity is in order, don't you think?
Sure.
Diana, and the reason I'm saying I'm a fanboy is because she has this YouTube channel where she does drum covers of popular songs from many genres, and she kills it.
Yeah.
And it's just she's fun to watch, and she's really tight with her drumming.
Yeah.
And that's probably an educational device for other drummers who want to learn some of these things.
Excellent.
Check her out at Diana Plays Drums on YouTube.
Very nice. Diana Plays Drums on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And, as long as she's in Huntsville, Alabama, we know a couple of people there. We could make some introductions.
I did mention those people actually to her. She didn't know them yet, but soon she will.
Awesome.
Maybe.
Awesome.
We'll see. Or maybe we'll come out and see her.
Love it. Yeah.
But anyways, my favorite so far is her cover of Africa by Toto. It's pretty tight. And there's some funny little changes in there, too.
Cool, yeah. And if anyone else wants to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/musicstudent101.
Mm-hmm.
And you get, there are 3 tiers of support that give you 3 tiers of increasingly interesting stuff.
Exactly.
All the way up to us answering your music question.
Yeah.
Specifically.
You get your own episode. We put it up on the Patreon site.
And we put it on the Patreon site in no less than 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always more than 15 minutes. We haven't been able to keep it under 15 a single time yet.
We are incapable.
We are totally incapable.
You get us nerding out, man.
That would require 0 digression, and that's just not that's not why you even listen to this podcast. Honestly.
But we digress.
But we digress.
Okay, so anyways, thanks, Diana. Thank you for your Patreon patronage and everything you're also doing to help us out with your reviews and everything.
Thank you very much.
And then finally, we have a listener mail from Fred Handel of the Netherlands.
Oh, very nice.
Fred is a music teacher and performing artist from The Hague, which is the capital city of South Holland.
Mm-hmm.
He has recorded several solo piano albums and has recently been focusing on the music of Frank Zappa.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh.
That's getting deep. Zappa did some sophisticated stuff.
That's like 10th Dan black belt stuff for music, listening and playing, performing. That's huge. He has some insights for us regarding the ease and reading of certain keys signatures as they relate to the piano. And having heard his music and watched his videos, I'll imagine these insights to be worth a listen.
Okay,
so
awesome.
What does he have to say? What does Fred have to say, Matt?
So Fred says, been listening to your podcast for the last couple of days. Thanks for sharing. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to respond to your episode about sharps and flats. At one point, you state that 5 sharps is easier than 7 flats.
Uh-huh. I think that might have been me.
I beg to differ. When reading music, all notes on paper have to be played half a step lower. This is easier than having to know which 5 go up and which 2 stay put.
Uh-huh.
And to your question, if 8 sharps is the same as 4 flats, yes. Fascinating take.
Yeah, well,
fascinating take.
This is a pianist. He reads these things.
And I was going to say it has a lot to do with the instrument you're playing.
I'm inclined to agree.
So I've said this both about C sharp and C flat. Just take everything up a step. That is very, very easy on guitar and bass, right? On bass, you're just it's all the same fingering patterns. Just take it up
Shift
a half
it up
or
or
down a
shift it
half
down,
for
yeah.
C flat. So C sharp and C flat are both very easy. Even analyzing music theory, C sharp is really not that big a deal because it just looks like C if you're ignoring the right. But it is if you are, however, playing clarinet or oboe or flute or trumpet or something like this, you would very much rather see 5 sharps and 7 flats.
Okay.
And guitarists often will like sharps just in general. Just because, if you're playing in B, that means your fourth is going to be an E, right? So you're going to have open strings, right? But if that E was written as F flat, you're not necessarily going to notice that firsthand, right?
Yeah.
So instrumentally, these things can have, what sounds easier or not, can change.
Well, hearing that from someone who has composed for all those different parts and different clefs and different, I'm inclined to take your word for it as well.
At some point, it just becomes all easy, right? I mean, at some point, you just know your scales and keys, and and there you have it.
I'm still waiting on that.
Is 8 sharps the same as 4 flats? So 8 sharps would be G sharp,
Okay.
which is the enharmonic equivalent of A flat.
Okay.
So yeah.
There you go.
There you go. I don't know why I didn't say that at the time, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you for that insight, Fred.
Yes, thank you, Fred.
And also, as we mentioned, he's been on a Zappa kick, which can be experienced on his new album, Zappa,
Nice.
a collection of his piano arrangements based on Frank Zappa's music, like we said.
Excellent.
And you can hear that and more of his music on his website, fredhandel.com. It's Fred, like it sounds, FredHandl.
Yes.
Supporting our fellow musicians online, let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
I want to relate it to, and then we'll move on to the episode. I want to relate it to the local scene. Like in the past, here in Birmingham, we all have musician friends, and a lot of them come to our shows. And then I feel, well, I should go and support them and go to their shows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now, fortunately, we have a bunch of friends from all over the world, all friends of the show and therefore friends of each other, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to people like Fred and Diana who support us, you can support them also, as I will and have done. Go and check out their sites and click like and subscribe and share.
Excellent. Yeah. There's a huge musical family around this podcast at this point. And we also have a Facebook page.
Oh, yeah. Keep on forgetting about that. That's our social media presence,
Yeah,
basically.
the Music Student 101 Facebook page. I think there's one that you can just join, and then there's one that I have to approve of you joining. And the only requisite for you getting approval is look like a real person when I look at your Facebook profile.
Yeah, maybe it has something about your musical interests, you know what I mean?
Something about your musical instrument interests, but in general, just look like not spam.
Because we have had to kick a lot of spam, for sure.
We have.
Matt's pretty good at staying on top of that. Thank God.
The only rule is don't tick off the doctor over here.
Doctor.
That's you annoy me and you're gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Fortunately, the only people who do that are actually genuinely being very annoying. No, most people aren't.
Yeah, Matt ain't that easy to annoy.
Not that easy to annoy. I mean, you can do it. Don't be spamming your own personal music instruction that you devised. 6 posts a day. That's going to get you booted.
Sure enough. Get your own page.
Get your own page. Yeah.
Well, anyways, this closes our social section.
Yep.
So, again, we want to thank Huff and Propane, Diana Hoskins, and Fred Handel.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, so my process was as follows. Of course, I read a few articles and checked out a few videos, but then kind of took from that, which were some of the top apps, and I made sure they all had 4 stars and above
Right.
before I even mentioned them.
Yeah.
And then we'll bring a few of those, give a little rundown of the apps.
And I'm going to enjoy this because I don't know much about what's out there now. So I'm going to enjoy learning from your research here.
Well, a lot of these things are ear training and theory apps that we kind of don't really need as much anymore. You know what I mean? I could always use ear training and a little bit of theory, but
me too. But I'm stuck on the same ones.
Yeah, well, we're
like I've been using the same ones since time immemorial, and
hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, but there could be a better mousetrap out there, and I kind of suspect there is.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, there's been a few new things since then, and a few new technological, evolutions.
Absolutely.
Since then.
Absolutely.
2016. So we'll try and give you a little rundown of each app, and then maybe current pricings as of June 2025.
Right.
And then we're going to go, at the end, we're going to go over some ear training tricks that we might have picked up in the last 9 years since that ear training episode. So we'll see what you come up with, Matt.
Oh, I can't wait.
I got a couple myself.
I can't wait for that.
So first of all, I'm going to catch up on what we talked about in the past and what all that is still around and better or not around or
Absolutely,
worse,
yeah.
more expensive or less expensive. And then we're going to talk about ear training apps.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to talk about tempo and timekeeping apps.
Awesome.
And then we're going to talk about notation apps, a couple of good notation apps.
Excellent.
Free and expensive.
Free and expensive. Free all the way up to expensive.
So when Matt and I were in college studying music theory on, just basic ear training, there was an app called MacGammit,
And we ought to do like an online poll somewhere or something where we say, send us the pejorative nicknames. If you were in music college in the 90s, send us the pejorative nicknames you came up with for MacGammit. And your horror stories.
Mine was Mac Darn It, but not Darn It.
That was the basic
other
one where we went to college. Yeah.
McDangit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Trying to stay family friendly here.
Yeah. I've heard other good ones. And I've heard some real horror stories. And by horror stories, I mean people hate this app.
Mm-hmm.
They hate this app. And believe me, I understand why.
Hell yeah. Well, I tell you what, MacGammit is now partnered up with Artusi Music, but appears to be the same style and format as MacGammit. Do you want to explain that for us, Matt?
Well, okay, so MacGammit had, and I'm basically going off my memory now from back in the dark ages, that time of yore called the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Late 90s, mind you.
Late 90s, indeed. But from what I recall back then, so it had several levels of difficulty. So it had levels of subject matter, where the first one was just listen to a major scale, and like by level 25, you were dictating Schumann symphonies or something, right? And then within each level, there were increasing levels of difficulty.
Yeah.
The fun part was, you could not advance until you could not just hop around in levels. You had to advance.
Yeah.
Right? So you had to complete level 1 difficulty A before you could go to level 1 difficulty B. Right? And so you kind of had to advance. And to advance properly, am I remembering this correctly? You only got like 3 listens or something?
Yeah, something like 3 listens, and you had to get like 8 out of 10.
And you had to get like 8 out of 10 to move on. Yeah. And it got really hard, really fast. And if your professor was particularly sadistic, right, he would say like, all right, be at level 4 by 2 weeks from now or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if you put this off until the night is due and you're up all night trying to get to level 4 on MacGammit, man, do you hate this?
That's what people hate about it. Well, it's not really the MacGammit software. Then it's really more their own deadlines.
Their own, yeah.
But no, seriously, what are some other real complaints about MacGammit?
It's hard.
One I've heard was the sounds just aren't that great. The piano sounds, the MIDI sounds.
Yeah, well, they're old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that one a good bit, but the biggest complaint I got from MacGammit was that it's just hard. Mm-hmm. That it's just very frustrating and very difficult, and it advances very fast, and you get out of your depth pretty quickly, and then it doesn't really give you a whole lot of pedagogical advice other than try again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right. Wrong.
Yeah, I think that's why people think of it as very hard, very difficult, even when they don't really, have the words to articulate that necessarily. Looking back on it, there's not a whole lot where it says try listening to it this way. It's just try again, right? You got it wrong. Try again.
Right.
Now, if you get good at McGamet, your oral ability is fine.
Yeah.
If you get to level 15 or 16, your oral ability is fine. Your ears are as good as they need to be.
Yeah.
And you're probably much better at this than most people. So it will increase your oral skills by a lot.
Yeah.
It is, you cannot argue with the results. People are who hammered away at this get really, really, really good. The problem is it is grueling to hammer away at it. Grueling.
Yeah. It's not something you can just cram the night before a test.
Oh gosh, no, yeah. That's why. Yeah, other professors, because it also kept track of how long you had been at it, right? Which could be depressing if you ever. But some professors would be kind of nice and say, all right, just be at it for this certain amount of time, and rather than making you advance, and that was easier, Of course, but then if you were inactive for a certain amount of time, it would go to sleep.
Yeah, right.
And then you're not getting your. So you can't just turn it on and leave it. We tried that.
Believe me, we
tried.
Yeah, we tried it all.
We tried that.
Well, McGamet is now kind of on a website desktop format, and it still seems to be geared more towards academia. So they have pricing for individuals, which is about $10 a month. And then that's up from a $40 lifetime back in 2016.
You could buy it forever. Yeah.
So, and it's also, they have teaching prices, which charge per student.
Yeah. Back in 2016, they were on their way out, but there was still the idea of a CD-ROM with a right. And because I remember the last version of McGamet I had was I bought the CD-ROM and I could just throw it in the. Versus those old floppy disks that had it when we were
zip discs.
Zip discs, that's what it was. They were like 5 megabyte, which we thought was huge.
Totally, it was back then. Well, that's kind of the past, but you can find them at R2C if you're interested in that. However, there are some other apps that are more widely accessible and a little bit more affordable.
With a little bit of a bigger dopamine hit, I would think, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because McGamet, the style was very sterile compared to a lot of apps today that are more in like a video game kind of format.
Indeed, yeah. Like I said, not to diss McGamet because, I mean, yes, it was sterile, but they were one of the first. And two, you cannot argue with the results. So if you are a music major and you do need to get good at this, wow, if you want to hammer away at McGamet, boy, will you get good at it.
Now, one alternative in the world of academia might be, or that might be useful for academia, is called Toned Ear. And it's website based also, but it's available on Android and iOS. And like McGamet, it is in quiz format. Where you answer correctly 80% out of maybe 20 or so examples.
Yeah,
you can move on to the next level. And there is a teacher site that charges per student, kind of like McGamet, suggesting it to be useful in academia.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing anywhere that they charge subscription for individuals. Maybe if I'd spent more time on it, I would at some point get blocked and be like, okay, you spent your 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Now you got to pay for premium. But I didn't get that far.
Yeah.
So that's Toned Ear. Check that out. Because
check that out, yeah.
I didn't see a lot of stuff different from what McGamet had. And we're talking intervals, scales, modes, chord progressions, all kinds of things like that.
Much like in music theory itself, most apps or programs or even textbooks that are trying to teach you ear training are going to go through the same material. It's going to be the same subject matter.
Yes.
So you're going to learn to do intervals, and you're going to learn to hear chords, and you're going to graduate to melodies and then harmony. Right. The difference is always in the pedagogical approach.
Yes.
Right. So, don't expect any of them to leave out any of the big stuff, right? But the question is in pedagogical approach. Do you really want to bang away at that, or is some of the other ones a little more freeform? Like I can go over here and practice intervals for a little while, and then I can come over here and try melodic dictation for a little while, and go back and forth. And it's more of a sandbox than
Yeah, exactly. Good way to put it, man.
yeah.
And speaking of video games and so forth, I don't know if it was in episode 4, but since then I'm sure I've mentioned Rocksmith, which was a game you can
I remember you mentioning that.
like
Yeah.
on my PlayStation 4. I could plug in my guitar through the MIDI to 1/4-inch cable, and there's this
Yeah.
video game where you can actually. It's very well done, very responsive, and you can actually learn kind of like what was that game, Rockstar,
Yeah.
but it's actually you're really playing your instrument, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're still around. Now they include piano and acoustic guitar, and of course, along with electric and bass, like initially they did. And it's available on iOS, Android, PC, and PlayStation.
Yeah.
And for free, you can get limited access to the songs. However, the subscription is a little pricey, and so is the cable you might need for the interface. Also, you can access all the songs in their catalog, many of which I recognize from the PS4 version that I've already spent a lot of money on. Now I got to pay for a subscription to play them again.
Man, don't get me started on an old man rant about the whole subscription model versus when you could just buy it and it was yours.
Oh, I can't even hire a bug dude like once a year like I used to. I have to get some kind of company to come out here. They don't need to come out here every month, but they do. For a subscription service for your bug people, termite people.
My bug people, I got the opposite problem. I can't get them out. I'm just paying them just for what? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I'll introduce you to mine. They're very attentive.
Good.
Anyways, back to Rocksmith. I'm seeing where you can use your smartphone as an interface as opposed to the cable, but I'm not sure how that would work out yet.
Your smartphone is an interface as opposed. That sounds like it would be kind of iffy in actual functionality.
It sounds like you would have delay issues and latency issues, which even plugging my bass directly into the PS5 version, the new version, I'm noticing some latency to where it's almost annoying.
Wow,
if I hit the string, pluck, you know what I mean?
That's no good.
No good at all. So, anyways, check it out, but be wary of those things.
Yeah.
It's $20 a month or $140 a year for subscription to Rocksmith.
$20 a month.
Yeah.
That, man, you can get like Netflix in 4K for that.
Yeah, and one PS4 game alone is like $60, so 3 months in, you've already paid for a full game, but you have to keep
But you're still playing. Yeah, wow.
Uh-huh. So compare that to private lessons. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and you're getting so much more out of private lessons.
Yeah, you're getting feedback and all that
yeah.
stuff. But still, it's available for Mac, PC, iOS, and Android if you're interested. We'll just bring it up. That was back in the day, and that's what's changed. And then, Matt, I think you mentioned a while ago in that episode an app called Tenuto that you're kind of into.
Yeah.
From musictheory.net, and that's still around with many new improvements since we last spoke of it.
Yeah.
What do you remember from that one?
What I remember from that one is that it was sort of the app version of musictheory.net, which had been around for a while, right? And on musictheory.net, you can practice not just ear training, but you can do theory exercises and stuff too.
Yeah.
So it's a good resource for anybody just wanting to sharpen some of their basic music theory skills. Tenuto was their ear training app. I remember it had like a little digital piano for you to hit the notes in and things. And like everything, you could practice, it was sort of tiered, like, stage 1, interval, stage 2, chord, stage 3. But it wasn't, it wasn't like
Locked.
locked. Yeah, right. Yeah, you could go in, you could go up and down around those. So you visually saw like, okay, this is sort of the order you should maybe practice these things, get good at this and then move on. But you weren't confined to that. And I remember it being very, very good for interval training.
I remember it being just very comprehensive in terms of all the options that you have.
Yeah, you had a lot you could do for a seemingly little app that was free at the time.
Yeah. Well, I think these days it's about $5 for a lifetime. Which come on.
$5 for a lifetime of ear training is not a lot. That's a pretty good steal. That app's probably worth $5.
Especially when it's comprehensive. So Tenuto is still around for a good reason, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
And they had this kind of question answer format where they would play a reference note and then they would play another note and you got to guess or you got to, answer what the note is.
Yeah. That, which is a little bit innovative from just play, for something like what McGammett would do. Where it's just, play this melody, play this note, you got it wrong, try again, right? So little things like that where he's like, all right, here's this note. And then they would play another note in the scale, right? So or say, basically just another note in the scale, and then say, this is scaled to be 5 or whatever, based on,
Oh, and they also you can switch around from note names to scale degrees or solfege.
Yeah.
So you have those options. You can do scales and modes, and they have a lot of scales. Like I'm talking bebop scales, things that we don't really talk about a whole lot. But if you go to the scales episode, you'll hear about them. But a lot of these things stick with major, minor, and then the modes, the diatonic modes. But they go a little bit further into tenuto.
Yeah.
And then there's a challenge mode where you can try and get a certain amount of answers within a set time limit.
Fun.
And it'll save your high scores, and you can share them with other participants.
Yeah. Somebody's put a lot of time and attention into that particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like they consulted ear training teachers.
Yeah. That's a good sign, right?
That's a great sign.
So, but unfortunately, this is only for iOS, all that to say.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
Yeah.
man.
But
being a mostly a Mac person, I didn't even realize it wasn't on Windows.
yeah, so not to tease all of our other listeners, but we got some good news for you. That was the past. It's still around, but let's get into more contemporary ear training apps, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because we mentioned toned ear.
Yes.
When I first thought it was toned deer,
Tone deer.
like the little creatures. But it is toned ear.
As in an ear that is toned.
Exactly.
Whatever that means.
Well, similar to that, and similar to McGammett and all these other ones, is one called Functional Ear Trainer.
Mm-hmm.
It's available on iOS, Google Play, and Android, and it uses a method established by Alan Ben-Bassett. Do you know of him?
Mm-mm.
So in this method, they'll play like a 1-4-5-1 progression to get you centered in the key, and then they just give you a note using solfege. So actually, I'm going to pull out this little app here and just give you a quick example. This, you start off with do, re, and then you can level up to do, re, mi. I've gone up to so far do, re, mi, fa. So let's just listen.
Okay.
There's a key. Well,
It's do.
look, you're right.
Soul.
I don't.
Oh, no, fa. Fa. It's fa.
Yep. Oh, and also, shut up. Also,
Be quiet now, app.
when they play, when you get the right note, if it's not a 1, 3, or 5, or no, if it's not a 1, they'll play the note and then walk down to the 1 or up to so.
Which I love that.
you can
I
kind
love
of hear
that.
where it sits and how it relates to the tonic,
I love that.
which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
The basic version is free, and for $20, you get a lifetime access with way more options, such as better sounds for instruments, melodic dictation exercises, and no ads. And then there's a listening mode to where it plays chord exercises that you don't have to respond to. You can just listen as you're walking or
Oh,
driving.
that's cool.
Yeah, isn't it? Isn't it?
Oh.
So, although that looks like a limited offer, it's down from $100 for lifetime. So this might be a limited offer. But either way, $100 for lifetime these days isn't even that bad.
I mean, if you've got $100 to spend on an ear training app at some point in your life.
Mm-hmm. There's another app called Polytonus for about $6, where you can expand the number of notes to intervals and thicker, more complicated chords. So you know how we just played 1, 4, 5, 1, and then we heard one note? Well, this Polytonus app, bless you.
Thank you.
This Polytonus app, you can actually have more chords playing at one time. So they'll play the 1, 4, 5 progression, but maybe they'll play a major,
Like a 6 chord.
a 6 major, or something like that.
German augmented 6.
And you can keep leveling up. You can start off with 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, and keep on going up to where next thing you know, you just
Common tone, diminished 7 chord.
just put your arm on the piano and there's your chord. You know what I mean? So let's move on, shall we? There's other ways that these music apps can be useful in the theory world and in the practice world. There's one called Tune Transcriber, and this is interesting. On this site, it's actually a web-based thing, and you can load an MP3 or a YouTube video even, and then you can select the selection you want to learn or transcribe, and you can loop it or slow it down without affecting the pitch. So this is
Very
good for
nice.
people who want to learn riffs and solos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you can also add ID markers with it. You can see the waveform of the music you're working with here.
Sweet.
And you can add ID markers such as riff 1, riff 2, solo, and so on.
That's fascinating.
And that is Tune Transcriber.
Yeah, very important if you're actually shopping for these apps to sort of have a good sense of what it is you're wanting to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you want, better ear training in the academic sense than, Tenuto, functional ear trainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking to learn guitar riffs, then maybe something Tune Transcriber
Mm-hmm.
is better. And there are apps out there designed for you to develop your ear in the sense of, I heard this song on Spotify and now I can go play it.
Mm-hmm.
Can sort of pick tunes out,
Yes.
And yes, it's all the same stuff, but there's different focuses, right?
Although I did get the impression that it's not as easy as uploading from Spotify or iTunes, for example. I think it's more just YouTube videos or your own MP3. So you might have to go through a certain process if you want to play,
Yeah.
any song that's on Spotify. You might have to run it through another system, make an MP3 out of it, and then upload it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That might be a little wonky, but it's a great idea in practice and
Yeah.
concept.
Absolutely.
Moving on, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, so next up along those lines is an app called the Ear Gym, which is very comprehensive in terms of listening options.
Gym as in GYM.
Yes, GYM.
Okay.
The Ear Gym.
The ear gym.
And it's very comprehensive in terms of options, but not a lot of theory. According to the website, the Ear Gym provides exercises for intervals, scales, chords, harmony, clefs, and perfect pitch.
Question mark.
Are they being a little overzealous when they say that?
Well, I'm sure they provide exercises in which, you can test your perfect pitch. That's easy to conceive of.
Yeah.
Whether or not they help you attain perfect pitch, probably not.
No, I think what they're probably referring to is relative pitch.
They're probably referring to relative pitch, but because nobody knows what that means, it's easier to market the idea of perfect pitch.
It's easier to make a sales pitch with perfect pitch.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
But be wary of that, y'all.
I mean, they may well have an exercise where they play a note and say, okay, what note is this? And it's completely out of context. You're supposed to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Is any amount of that going to give you perfect pitch?
No, it's just going to let you know how not perfect your pitch is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about relative pitch.
I'll tell you this. I do not have perfect pitch. My relative pitch goes from good to decent depending on how much I'm practicing.
Hey, Siri, how many Americans have perfect pitch?
It is estimated that 1 in 10,000 people in the United States have perfect pitch.
So 1 out of 10,000 people in the States are born with perfect pitch.
Perfect pitch.
So if you're not one of them, you can do just fine with relative pitch. And you can actually develop that skill to almost perfect pitch levels.
I find that the closest I get to perfect pitch is when I'm talking about my instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can hear the low E string of a bass, and I know that's low E.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just has that character that I've heard. It is this indefinable thing that just it sits in that notch that I've heard so many times.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think if you heard that same E on a piano, would you still be able to identify it? Or is it really the bass?
Maybe not.
The bass timbre? Or
It's
is it
really just, yeah.
Because it might just be your brain knowing those frequencies, subconsciously knowing what exactly
Yeah.
those frequencies sound like.
Yeah, I don't know if I would hear that E on a piano and know it. Probably not. I think it has to be bass.
I think I'm the same. I can easier, especially in the lower register,
Yeah, especially, well, that's where we play all the time.
kind of
really.
get an idea, of where I'm at,
Yeah.
but not perfectly. If you took my bass and you tuned that E down just a half cent
Uh-huh.
and you played it, I'd be like, "Yeah, buddy, that's an E,"
Yeah.
but I would be off. You know what I mean? It wouldn't
Yeah.
be perfect pitch.
Yeah, but now if you tuned it all the way down to E flat,
Yeah, well,
like, okay, your bass is out of tune.
I might catch that.
I'd catch that, yeah.
Perfect pitch people, you can throw a rock on the ground. They can tell you what 10 notes were involved in the rock hitting the ground. You know what I mean?
We had a classmate when we were in college that could do that.
Who was that?
Do you remember Marlon Spears?
Mm-hmm.
He could tell you what note the fluorescent lights were buzzing at, and
And he was blind, right?
he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, digressing into perfect pitch, but
which we did an episode on.
we did a whole episode on it.
By
Go
the
listen
way.
to that.
And before we move on, I should clarify, this is the Ear Gym. If you go to eargym, EARGYM.com, it's a site dedicated to auditory training for hearing loss, which is not without its merit,
Yeah,
but that's a different thing.
whole different thing. Yeah. So there you go.
Now, there's another app called Sound Gym, GYM, just like Ear Gym, although
Sound Gym.
it's not related. It's a different company.
Yeah.
But it's recommended for studio folk and audio engineers. And it's very interesting because they'll play a song without EQ, and then you push the EQ button and it shows the EQ kick
Oh,
in.
wow. Yeah.
And then you have to figure out what band has been affected.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
I did horribly on that, but I mean to really get into that and do better. You know, 'cause
That's amazing that somebody had that idea. Yeah, again, have a good sense of what you want out of your ear training and what the term ear training means to you, right? If you work in a studio, as a sound engineer, then that's probably the most valuable app we've talked about so far. Yeah.
You don't need to know so much, oh, that was a 1-2-5 progression.
No, but
as you need to be like, that sounds just fuzzy or edgy.
But
What is that?
but the ability to tell that hum is it about 20K hertz or something? Yeah,
Now, that's a skill.
that's a skill.
Totally. And you can train for that. you know?
Yes.
And not only do they do EQ recognition, but also compression and gain recognition. Hey, is this part louder?
Yeah.
Does this sound squished or compressed?
Yeah. I wonder if they do like high pass and low pass filters.
Probably so, because that might go into the EQ recognition.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do panning recognition, which, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But still, it might be a challenge for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty straightforward till you get old and your hearing starts to go.
that's a good point. You might not hear something as well in one ear
As you do in the other. Yeah.
Yeah. The free version of Sound Gym gives you limited daily access, of course.
Yeah.
Maybe you get about 15 minutes, or maybe you get 3 exercises a day or something like that.
Mm.
Where the premium version runs about $25 per month, or $8 per month with a yearly subscription. That ain't crazy.
Go ahead and get the yearly.
Yeah, or $346 for lifetime, which adds up over time.
Yeah.
In my experience, by the time I spend something like that on a lifetime, I do it for maybe about a half a year. And I'm like, oh man, why did I spend all that money on something I don't use anymore?
Yeah.
That's just me, because I'm not as...
That sounds expensive, but man, what a neat idea.
Another cool thing about Sound Gym is there's kind of a communal aspect where you can compare and compete scores with other participants.
Oh, yeah.
Win points and rewards,
Yeah.
So that's kind of a cool thing.
I suppose.
That's kind of becoming more and more commonplace these days.
Yeah, well, it's becoming easier to do, but yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
So let's get on to let's change it up a little bit and get into rhythm, shall we?
Let's talk about rhythm.
So we just talked about Sound Gym and Ear Gym,
Mm-hmm.
unrelated, of course, but now Tone Gym is related to Sound Gym,
Okay.
same company,
All right.
and it has some really great tonal ear training games, but also some cool rhythm exercises that I think I want to share.
Okay.
Okay, so on one, it shows the notation and then counts off a click track while you click the notes on your mouse or your space bar or whatever. While you click the notes as the timeline passes them.
Ah.
So it's like you're working on rhythms, no tones that you're just kind of trying to read.
Yeah.
Quarter note, dun, 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 and so on.
Yeah, right.
And you can, of course, get very complex with syncopations and smaller note values and stuff like that. But I thought that was pretty cool. And then another one plays the rhythm in the first measure while you play it back in the following measure. So it's kind of like that's called parrot mode. Kind of
Yeah.
trying to get the exact rhythm you just heard.
Yeah.
Now, I show my age a little bit when I reminisce on a game called Simon.
I remember Simon.
Do you remember Simon? It was like this little kind of disc bass with 4 little panels that you push. It'll play a little tune and light.
Yeah, I think my dad wanted to chuck that out the window.
I'm pretty sure mine did too. I don't think we had it for very long.
Somehow I got lost. I
I
don't
have
know
to ask
what.
him about that. But it's kind of similar. It's just kind of like a call and response thing, which is really good, I think, for rhythm. For rhythm
Yeah.
recognition. And like I said, Tone Gym comes from the same crew that brought us Sound Gym, and as previously discussed, with it comes the same community vibe.
Yeah.
Like I said, more and more I'm seeing this video game style reward system, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Anything that gives you a dopamine hit to help you
Oh,
practice.
just give me a star and a chime and watch my oxytocin levels kiss the sky. I love it. I need it. And then Tone Gym is slightly less pricey than Sound Gym, so
Okay. Oh, good.
it's not quite as expensive, but it's in that neighborhood. I think it was like $5 with a yearly subscription, $5 a month versus $8 a month, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Gap Click. Hey, drummers.
Hey, drummers.
Let me tell you about this one. This is really cool. This is available on the App Store and on Google Play, which means Android. I think you can get that on Android.
I think that's what that means.
And for a one-time purchase of about $3, it's so simple and yet so brilliant for internal timekeeping. Here's what it does. For example, you can set 4 measures and then loop it, right?
Mhm.
And then the first 3 measures have a click track going, and then they leave the 4th silent. So you play along, and this is
The
you're
click
playing your
track,
groove.
yeah.
Dun, dun, click, click. You're playing along, and
Yeah.
then boom, silence. So you got to keep on.
And you got to
clicking.
keep up, and then does it come back in?
And it comes back to the loop. So you got to make sure that you're back on. You're,
Hence the term gap click.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just really brilliant and really useful. And
Yeah.
if you can play that measure unaided,
Yeah, so fly without a net for just those 4 beats, and
keep it solid and land back on the downbeat of the loop.
yeah.
Gap Click will let you know, like it or not. And you can tweak the challenge level in a few ways. For one thing, you can do it where it's like accenting beat 2 and 3, or maybe it accents beat 2 and that's it.
Yeah.
Or maybe it shows up on the upbeat. So you can do things to kind of throw yourself off a little bit.
Wow.
And you can change the number of silent measures. Maybe you just have 1 measure of click and then the other 3
Yeah.
or 7 or whatever.
If you're really good.
If you're really good. Maybe over time and practice you will be. That's the idea, I suppose.
I suppose. I need to practice with the metronome more. I don't do that enough.
We all do, especially as rhythm folk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got no excuse.
And drummers especially have no excuse. And speaking of drummers,
Speaking of drummers.
our good Diana Hoskins, who we mentioned earlier in the show, has mentioned a really good one, or a very interesting one, called Moises.
Moises.
Like noises with an M,
Okay.
And here you can remove vocals and instruments from any song. You can adjust the speed, change the pitch, and enable metronome counts. It's powered by artificial intelligence.
One of the only things AI has done so far that I have any interest in is that it's really allowed us to come in, and this used to be a really hard thing. Again, back in the dark ages, that time of year called the 90s, it was, you really couldn't remove a track from a recording.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you could try to snuff out the EQ area it was in, the band it was on.
Yep.
If you wanted it to not have vocals on, but you really couldn't just kind of go in and pretend like there were no vocals there, or there was no. Now, oh man, now you can do anything, right? I mean, that AI can get in there and separate out the frequencies and assign them to the instruments, and
Where we used to have the stems or the actual original tracks and just
yeah,
rebounce and mute it and all that stuff.
yeah, like somebody at one point actually went into Metallica's "And Justice for All" and brought the bass back up.
Yeah, thank you, God.
Because that album, famously, the bass is like, you can't hear it,
Yeah.
right? But there is a bass there. It was recorded, and like somebody went in and brought the bass back up in that album, and
I bet it was way cooler.
of course it was.
Of course it was. But anyways, that's worth checking out, I think. If you are especially a drummer and you want to play along, you can take out the drums altogether and just play with the rest of the band, or a bass player, take out the bass line. It's just,
Yeah.
karaoke, it's like take out the vocals,
Yeah.
And it's come a long way since karaoke, which I think
Oh,
they
yeah.
had to use the stem method, probably.
Yeah. Or just request a version from the producers or something,
Exactly. So anyways, for Moises, the premium, well, it's available for free with in-app purchases. And the premium and pro plans are $27 yearly or $210 yearly,
That's a lot of money.
respectively. And it's available on iOS, Google Play, and on desktop, which I assume is compatible with Mac or PC,
Yeah.
right? And then one more for rhythm. We had this one called Genius Jam Tracks, which I thought was pretty cool.
Genius Jam Tracks.
Yeah, they show you like a chord chart in the style of the fake books or the real books or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call them. Even the same font it looks like. And it seems pretty jazz friendly. And in fact, this would have been a lifesaver when we were taking lessons from Cleve, I'm sure. I might have been called a fool 10 times less than I was had I had
Out of
this.
the 150 times. It might have been more like 138.
Yeah, that's being generous. But you can play or mute drums, bass, piano, vocals, or play and just play along, kind of like what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, but jazz centric.
Yeah, and you can also kind of tweak the beats and assign swinging beats and syncopations to test your
that's
own
fun.
stability.
Yeah,
Um,
because you need to be those rhythmic skills in jazz.
yeah, the drum might not just be doing all.
Yeah.
It might be going. You know, I mean, just
They tend to like that.
yeah, especially them jazz cats. So that's a good way to get into that world if you're interested.
Yeah, awesome.
And this,
Again, it's really great that there's so many options out there. You know, again, go into it with an idea of what your end goal is.
Yeah.
Right. You know, you probably get better suited. You know, that way.
absolutely. Although sometimes you don't even know what your end goal is until you start getting into some of these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's available for iOS and Android and Google Play, and it lists for $20 on the App Store.
That's not terrible.
Not for a one-time purchase.
Yeah. One time purchase. Yeah, $20. Then you have it forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not terrible.
And I don't know, maybe there's in-app purchases where you can order more songs or something, but I think they have a pretty extensive library
Yeah.
available. So that's what I know about rhythm and metronoming.
Well, there you go.
And then finally, we have some notation to talk about.
Yeah.
This is probably where you shine, Matt.
Well, let's see.
All right, stand by.
All right.
So let's start off with one I'm familiar with, the most familiar with.
All right.
Muse Score.
Good old Muse score.
All of the
Poor man Sibelius.
all of the music, was that?
Poor man Sibelius.
A poor man's Sibelius. All of the music and notation-based graphics you've seen on our website were generated in Muse Score.
And good old Muse score.
Now, I haven't done anything so grand or articulate that I would even know if I was being limited by this software. Freeware, mind you.
It is freeware, and yeah, I have opinions about Muse score, and most of them are very positive, actually.
I haven't found any need that hasn't been met for what I need on this software.
That's the thing about, and no offense to other softwares,
Mm-hmm.
because that I use and that are very professional and all that, but a lot of people are going to have that kind of feeling. It's like, what do I need doing with a music notation software that MuseScore can't do?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are real hard pressed to answer that question.
Yeah.
And MuseScore is free.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what I said about it back in 2016, but from my recollection, it used to be very limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like there was only so many instruments you could get on a score.
Crappy sounding instruments, too.
Crappy sounding. There wasn't really any sound libraries. Yeah, no, really. There wasn't any sound libraries attached to it. So you're just dealing with MIDI,
Mm-hmm.
like old
QuickTime.
school 80s and 90s.
QuickTime MIDI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so just whatever general MIDI patch was on your sound card. And so it used to be really limited. So, I used to could say to people, all right, if all you want is like a quick and dirty piano score or something, and you don't want to have to pay for a notation program, go ahead and get MuseScore. It'll be fine.
Mhm.
If you're the only person who's going to look at this, it's like you're not going to produce publishable scores from MuseScore. But if you're the only one looking at this, go ahead and print it. Great. Just use MuseScore. It's good for that.
Mm-hmm.
That was 2016. That was 2020 even.
If we even talked about that in 2016.
Yeah. Right. Now, like this program has come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, first of all, I'm pretty sure you can get like orchestra-sized scores.
Yeah.
If there is a limit to the number of instruments you can get in a single score, it is big enough that it's not going to be very, very much of a concern for most people.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And it has its own sort of sound library attached to it now. So no junky, horrible QuickTime MIDI. It's got a sound library. A decent, it's not the best one in the world, but it's decent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for what it is. So now, in addition to saying, well, if you want a quick and dirty score, really, if you want any score that you're not looking to have professionally published, I have a hard time telling you why not to just use MuseScore.
Right.
You know, it's playback, and its controls are a lot like Sibelius. It's kind of modeled after Sibelius, with all those shortcuts and things hidden in places. Actually, I say that it's a little bit modeled after Finale too, with like the rhythms and the icons. And
They actually mentioned Finale specifically in their ad,
yeah,
which I thought was interesting.
there's a reason for that. We'll get to it in a minute.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the current version is part of their MuseScore hub,
Right. Yeah.
and along with the notation software comes Audacity.
Right. Which is a free audio editing software.
Yep, basic recording app.
Basic recording app. Yeah. If you just need to take your demo, to shop around or something, but you want to edit out the noise at the end or something like that, Audacity is great for little stuff like that. Throw a little reverb on it. Audacity is good for that kind of stuff.
Limited, but great. And that one's free. However, there's one called ToneBridge where you can download cool guitar sounds also.
Okay.
And maybe at some point you start paying for those. I
Who
don't know.
knows?
But there was another one called the fourth app on this Muse Hub is called StaffPad, which costs about $50 and seems to have pissed off one or two folks in there if the reviews have anything to say about it.
I have never used this, so I'm fascinated.
Well, I think it's like one of those things you have on your iPad, and you can use either your finger or your pen or a little stylus to add notes.
Yeah, that's that technology is in its infancy. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, because everyone's saying this is just too wonky. It's not responding.
Sorry, Apple with your iPad Pro and stuff, and everybody else who thinks this is supposed to be just so wonderful. It is not yet. I'm sorry to report.
Yes, be warned about that.
Be warned about that. Yeah.
But again, it's just an option,
Yeah.
within Muse Hub, which is free.
Which is yeah.
Oh, and also you can pay for scores, classical and popular, and all that stuff. You can
Now that is fun. MuseScore does have a big community, and on its website, they're a place where you can go and browse their catalog of scores of, again, famous classical pieces, people's original compositions, and whatever else. Some of these you'll have to pay for, and some of them are totally free. What you're getting is the MuseScore score, and usually a sound of it done in the MuseScore library. But you're getting this either for free or you're paying like $2 sometimes.
Yeah, for per song or per.
I've actually used this in some theory classes before because it's like I just need a copy of this piece, right? To show what Now that is all third party stuff, so you might you're trusting this person arranged
That's true.
Mozart's K284 correctly.
Yeah.
Put all the correct notes in the correct places and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you check that other than getting an original copy?
They're getting another original score, and if you have that, why do you need? Yeah.
Exactly. But anyways, again, the notation software is freeware, but they also accept donations.
Yes.
Kind of like this podcast.
Kind of like this podcast.
Wink, wink.
MusicStudent.101.
.com.
MusicStudent101.com, where our PayPal thing is.
Donations. Go to the donations page.
Yep. Patreon.com/MusicStudent101.
Mm-hmm.
We're so good at marketing. We're so good at plugging.
Yep. We're getting better. But we digress.
At least it occurred to us at this time.
At least it occurred to us.
Yeah.
So we have two more that are more standard in the professional world. And Matt, take it away, my man. We can start with Sibelius or Finale, whichever one you think is more worth.
Let's start with Sibelius.
Okay, go ahead, because you're more familiar with that one.
Sibelius is the main music software notation that I have used since about 2000. So about 25 years now. It is by no means perfect. I have wanted to punch it
Oh, man. That's
more than
expensive.
once in my life.
Yeah, I'm sure. Me too. That's why I'm on MuseScore.
Yeah.
At one point, I could afford Sibelius, and I bought it, but
Yeah. The advantage to Sibelius over MuseScore, in my mind, my personal opinion, is that Sibelius in addition to having a lot of functionality that MuseScore doesn't, so Sibelius has like auto arrange features, you know, and it has a step time, so we can just sort of play something and it shows up on the music page, and it'll, you know, live tempo where you can make the playback speed up and slow down in an intuitive way, not just, you know, with you know, new metronome entries or something, but like, you know, you can tap out the rhythm and then slow it down and then come back. So it's got
cool.
it's got a lot of cool functionalities like that. If you are a professional score person, it's worth it to have Sibelius, because you can do all that stuff. You can, you know, you can write orchestra pieces and then have it create orchestral parts. They've recently made that even easier than it was before, you know. And so there's a lot of functionality there that and a lot of convenience and things, just because the program's been around so long, that, you know, is maybe more difficult to do on MuseScore. Although, albeit MuseScore is catching up frighteningly fast.
Yeah.
I predict it's not too long that MuseScore is going to remain free anyway.
Right.
And Sibelius can look very, very professional. You've got lots of fonts options. You've got lots of size options, you know, like size of the staff and everything like that. You can edit a lot in terms of, you know, how high does the quarter note staff go, right? You know, and so you've got some options in there where it will look professional. Even more than that, it will look professional without you having to do a whole lot. If you just stick to the defaults, you know, Sibelius will look very, very good. You know, it will look very, very good coming out of the thing. And if that's important to you, that it look very, very good, then Sibelius is worth it. So that's my, and like I said, you don't have to go through, it sort of defaults to a lot of things to kind of help it look good and help it be easy, you know. And so if you're just doing a basic thing, then, you know, Sibelius's defaults with maybe a little bit of modification does a good job of that. Now, if you want to do something other than the defaults, now you are fighting and struggling and straining with this program and you want to punch it.
Yeah.
Because getting it to not do its defaults is just, man. But yeah, that is the big advantage to Sibelius at this time in my mind, is that it does look pretty. And it's easier to make it look pretty than it is to make MuseScore look pretty, in my personal opinion.
So did you buy this yourself, or do you normally use it through the universities that you work at?
Oh, both. I own it myself, and I've also used it through universities too.
Okay, so I'm seeing here Sibelius Ultimate annual subscription, $159 a year.
That sounds about accurate. Now, I'm getting an educator's discount. And if you are a student at a college, listen up, students at colleges, you can get a student discount on that.
Yes, I remember taking advantage of that a lot.
Yeah, and that still exists.
Yeah, good. But that's kind of the idea, right?
Yeah.
And then there was Finale. I do remember, I was learning on Finale back in college. I don't remember Sibelius at all.
So here's the thing with Finale.
All right, you got the smile on like an evil smile on your face.
It no longer exists.
Oh, that's kind of embarrassing.
Well, don't feel bad. It was shocking news in the world of notation software programs.
Yeah?
They just shut the doors.
Huh.
They are going to support, the word I remember is they were going to support Finale. There would be like maybe one more update or something, and then there'd be no more updates. And they were going to continue to offer support for it for like another year, and then they were going to shut that down. And then you would still be able to use the software for like a year after that, but then they were going to shut that down, and the software was not going to, because it's cloud-based now. The software was going to not be usable unless you had one of the old versions, you know, back when you could actually own stuff.
Yeah, you got to have that old Mac on with the old
the old
software.
Pre-subscription. Yeah, but they are shutting the doors. Finale no longer exists.
Well, that's the darndest thing, ain't it?
So back in the day, Finale is like where Sibelius could look pretty good and really professional. Finale just would look gorgeous.
Okay, so they had that going for them.
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing. Now, a lot of people, even people who knew how to use Finale, regularly complained about how unintuitive it was.
Mm.
And I mean, I often got this, I'm thinking of one person in particular, but I often got sentiments like this from other people that was like, well, you know, that's just the price of using Finale. You know, it's difficult and it's confusing and, you know, you have to struggle with it and you have to, you know, learn how to, but, you know, that's the price you pay for getting your notations. Like, have you heard of a thing called MuseScore?
Mm-hmm.
Or have you heard of a thing called Sibelius?
Yeah.
Or Dorico, which, you know,
Oh,
is...
yeah. Remember that one?
Yeah, but yeah, Finale, it had no defaults.
Huh.
So you kind of had to make every decision yourself about how this looked, at least back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But man, if you were willing to do that, these things could come out like it looked like you printed the score off of Boozy and Hawks or something, right? It looked gorgeous, just beautiful, and you had a huge amount of control over like the thickness of the lines and the eighth note flag. How thick is that flag?
Oh, that's
right?
pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you had a huge amount of control. It was probably the first one.
Yeah.
Finale was probably the first like serious graphics based. You know, there were code based was before that. You know, I shudder to think. But it was probably the first serious graphics based score notator. Use your computer to notate a score and print it out. And so it was a real dinosaur for a long time, and they made a lot of improvements to sort of workflow over the years, right? Trying to keep up with Sibelius.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those two were like the Coke and Pepsi of notation programs for a while there. But there was just too much competition. Sibelius was just too well marketed to professionals.
Yeah.
Right, and then non-professionals had MuseScore, and there was just no space anymore for Finale. People just don't really do that with their scores anymore.
It's also hard to compete with the slogan, Sibelius would have used Sibelius.
Sibelius would have used
Come on, that's
Sibelius.
good.
That is good. And Sibelius really sort of started encroaching on their territory with, you know, how good they can make it look.
Mm-hmm.
Sibelius has arguably gotten more difficult to use.
Mm-hmm.
And it's had its own problems, but Finale, I guess there was just no space in the market, and it's shutting its doors. It's no longer existing.
Well, then we know there's no need to even talk about the pricing or the availability.
There is no availability. I don't think you can purchase Sibelius or Finale anymore. I think they shut down the buying new version, the new people buying it is one of the first things they shut down. I don't think there's any option anymore.
Oh. That ship has sailed then, huh?
Yeah, right when I was getting ready to teach a music tech course where we were going to spend like 4 weeks learning Finale, you know, I learned that Finale is not going to exist. It's like, I should probably find something else to do with these 4 weeks. There's no point in teaching people how to use Finale.
No kidding. Although I guess you could argue that it's just notation. It's all the end. It's all to the end product you're going for. However you get to it, it's all putting notes on a staff line. And
Yeah, but you can do
dynamics
that
and
in
stuff like
Sibelius.
that. Exactly. Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah.
All right. Well, to close out, I think it'd be fun to just kind of talk about maybe some ear training tips we haven't shared, or maybe we've learned over the years since that episode, you know?
Yeah, because it's been a while.
But it'd be fun to reflect on some of our previous, like you were talking about when you were in school and you had, a 3-hour trip, round trip
Yeah.
to school, and your radio crapped out.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And so you're just doing what, solfege melodies?
Just do it. Yeah, I would just think of something that I could hum, like the theme to Star Trek or something, and just try to see if I could pick out what the solfege syllables to it would be.
Mm-hmm. And then I think you said that you also would come across a license tag if it says
I would do, yeah.
146 AL 146. Maybe you would try and sing those intervals.
Sing the 146. Yeah, yeah.
Whereas I had a radio, but instead I would I'd get my little tape recorder and play chord progressions on my piano and just drive around listening to those over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Try and have a random.
Just kind of those immersion tricks. It's not unlike what you do when you're learning a language, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Immersion tricks.
Yeah.
But anyways, do you have anything new since then that you like to share? Any cool new tips that you caught that provided some aha moments for you?
I still like to just, if I've got a melody stuck in my head, try to solfege it.
Yeah.
I'll do that in the shower. You know, I will still try to pick that out. And I've gotten pretty good at it man, I don't even remember what year that was that my radio crapped out and all that. But at this point, it's actually started to come in really helpful because I can sort of, pick out melodies that are in my head and communicate them to other people. Right? You know, I'll sketch them out real quick with just a fair amount of accuracy and say, here, play this, in some of my musical acts and things.
Now, aside from solfege being all one-syllable utterances, what's the advantage to that over numbers?
So solfege helps you sing better.
Okay.
It helps you sing the in-tune note better. Because ever since the 800s, when that monk whose name I always forget, something of Arezzo, he sort of devised the system. We've understood that associating that syllable with that pitch relative to a tonic, very, very helpful in learning and helping you remember where that pitch is.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you're okay. So you're assigning the vowel sounds to the pitches.
Yeah. So solfege helps you be a better singer. The numbers help you attach it to theory better.
Uh-huh.
Because, you learn that the tonic chord is the 1, the 3, and the 5, and then you sing 1, 3, 5.
Oh, yeah.
That makes sense, right?
There's not a do chord.
Yeah, there's not a do chord instead of do, mi, sol. And so, you learn, you attach things to theory better, and especially those fundamentals, like the diatonic chords, they get in your head what they are better, and it's much more helpful for that. One of the things that I think I've evolved on over the years is I actually will go back and forth between numbers and chords more than I use, or numbers and solfege more than I used to. I'll try both.
Yeah.
And I'll try to keep fresh with numbers too, because I think that has advantages of its own.
And likewise, I could probably spend more time with solfege as I just came up on numbers and we didn't even fool with solfege with my teacher.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if you're wanting to learn if you're wanting to tie it back into theory, numbers is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. I think a lot of our listeners probably do, if I had to guess.
Yeah. If you're trying to be a better singer, solfege is probably the way to go.
So you were doing solfege back in the day, and you kind of still stand by that practice, huh? Is there anything else that you can think about? What do you tell some of your students these days for ear training?
Let me see. What do I tell my students? So I'm almost certain we've talked about this at one point, but interval recognition, where you do this thing where, the interval is a song, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the perfect fifth is the opening to Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
Or, a major 6 is My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. I've kind of walked away from that.
Yeah.
Because I noticed at some point that it didn't really seem to help anyone when it was time to sing, when it was time to sight sing or to understand the melodies or to be able to dictate melodies.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really seem to really help anybody because I feel like it turns out maybe the human brain just doesn't process a melody that way. I mean, if I go, okay, I'm gonna go, all right, that's a major 6. How do I know that? That's My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, right? Or it's the NBC theme, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if I go, right? So you might have gotten the first was a major 6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you might have even caught that was a major 3rd. I doubt it.
Yeah, still the NBC thing.
What is this?
Oh, that might be the 6 also, right?
That's a 4th.
Oh boy, poof.
What's that?
No, I'm not gonna try.
Yeah. This is what I've come to realize is the human brain just doesn't work that way.
Certainly not this human brain.
Mine either. Mm-hmm. You can't just go major 6, down to minor 3rd, up, blah, 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 blah. That's almost like coding, you can't. So I've sort of started gearing more towards sing down the scale. So what's that interval? Right? So.
Perfect 4.
Yes, a perfect fourth. I've geared more towards that because I find that seems to be more helpful when people come to sight singing quizzes or things or dictation. It's like, all right, I know that we're not really high, but how high? We'll sing down the scale, right? That I find that is sort of because I find that we tend to, shocker, we tend to hear tonal music in relation to the tonic.
Yes.
Right? So we hear tonic as that place of rest, and we tend to hear things as sort of revolving around that.
Yeah.
So I've adjusted from that. I don't do the sing this, this is a melody that thing. That's great for passing interval dictation tests.
Yeah.
But does it actually help your ears when you're out in the world being a musician?
In the long run?
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. Other than that, there's what do I do differently now? I am definitely a fan of harmonic dictation. And I'm definitely a fan of you've got to do this a lot. Right? This isn't as easy as melodic dictation. You've got to do this a lot. So I'm really, and this is sort of cutting edge for me is where I am as a professor. I'm really getting into, okay, we need more practice on harmonic than melodic. We got to, because you've got to fine tune your ear. The difference between a 5 and a 5/7, is something that you only hear after you've heard both a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that thing we used to do where it's like, all right, do the melody, then do the bass line, and then do the chords.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, do the melody, then do the bass line. Now let's really think about the chords. I'm beginning to realize I have a tendency to rely on my theory brain that we've discussed before.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, this is this and that, and so what are my options? It sounded, I do that, but I do that less.
Right.
In favor of, does that sound like a diminished chord or a minor chord or, and then I can think, all right, well, what diminished chords do I have that fit these two, And that helps me like reinform that I got the melody and bass line right? So sometimes it's like, okay, maybe I got that note wrong in the soprano, and then, but, because if this sounds like a 2/6, but I didn't have scale degree 2 in there, well, maybe it was scale degree 2. And so it's kind of bringing back in.
Filling it back in.
Yeah.
But not trying to rely on your theory brain as much because in the real world, you're just hearing chords when you're playing with other people and trying to learn stuff, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think if you're talking about like how I've evolved since, those tips back in 2016 or whatever, I'm more towards immersion, real world experience. Not tips and tricks of how to get past the test.
Yeah.
But how do you get good at hearing this stuff?
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I remember even a while back, this maybe ties into what you're saying now, is you're listening for tension levels, dissonance levels.
As
opposed to note names and numbers and all that stuff.
Yeah, because that's what we're really trained to hear is dissonance and resolution. That's really the way tonal music works. Right? Yeah, so I'm listening to that more so than I'm trying to pick out a particular note.
Cool.
Oh.
All right, well, I got a couple things. First off, let's just discuss my reference tone scenario where I was saying you hear a G in the radio. Maybe you're hearing Wish You Were Here from Pink Floyd, and you know that song ends on a G, and then in your head you find out where that G was, and then you carry that note with you to reference any note to that G as you go. I'm not even sure if I can do that today, but also I'm easily distracted.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I also said you can snag like a B flat from a fluorescent light. You know? If you can find one these days, you can snag a B flat from a fluorescent light or any appliance in the USA emitting a 60 cycle hum.
Yep.
Well, B flat's not 60 cycle. That's 58.27 hertz. So that's not exactly a B flat.
Close enough.
You know what I'm saying? Close enough indeed.
Close enough.
But maybe what I was I was probably being a bit overzealous about the whole relative pitch thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My point is that we are surrounded with sounds that are consistent.
Yeah.
Let's see what I got here. I had a little fun last night and went around. Let's see here. Okay, this is my oven timer. That's a B, you know? Here's my PlayStation 5 booting up. You know, that's a B flat with a major chord, maybe with a 1 moving up to 3.
So actually kind of sound.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Very nice.
Yeah, I love little things like that.
And then finally, here's my car. So that dinging sound was a C sharp,
Yeah,
followed by an F sharp major chord in first inversion.
I was gonna say that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so the point being, we are surrounded by sounds that are consistent. So that if we really want to nerd out and get into it, we can identify sounds that we know are unchanging.
Yeah, the classic Mac boot up.
Oh, yeah.
But it's down here.
Oh, yeah. Was that a C major?
C major chord. Yeah.
Back in the days.
Yeah.
So we are surrounded by notes that we know are consistent and unchanging. You know? So if you really wanted to, you could anchor to one note or the other throughout your day and use that as a reference if you have the attention span to hang on to it in your head.
Yeah.
And even then, that can be difficult, I realize,
Yeah.
you know? But that's just one thing. We might have a relative edge on relative pitch through those methods. And then finally, one thing I've been doing a bit more of recently is getting used to singing arpeggios on chords that you hear and then move around with them. Be it a chord that vamps throughout the song or maybe the final chord of a song where you finally land on that final chord.
Yeah.
So play me a G chord, for example, Matt.
G.
So I'll move around it in my head.
Yeah. I do that too.
I walk down from the 3.
Yeah, I'll play a lower octave G. So.
3, 2, 1, right? 1, 5.
Yeah. I'll do that too.
So I use the walk.
So, re. And then when you get really good, you get out of the chord, right? Do, so, fa, mi, re. Re, fa, mi, chi, do. Right? You get really good. So
maybe you're still doing solfege for that internal exercise, but I'm using numbers when I'm doing it.
yeah, well, I grew up on solfege.
Or I'm just humming.
My common tongue.
Na,
Yeah.
na, 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 na. I mean, I try and move around within the chord that I'm given, and that just kind of gives me an idea of with the dissonance levels of each note and how they feel and how they sound.
Yeah.
Spending time on each one of them. So I've been doing more of that lately.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add to that? I mean,
That's pretty much it. A lot of the same stuff is still good advice, you know. But
absolutely. That stuff doesn't change. Ear training doesn't change.
ear
but
training doesn't change.
approaches and devices that can get us closer to it may have.
Yeah.
You know, and methods and practices. So hopefully you guys got something out of that.
I certainly hope so.
And some of these apps I've been actually really digging, and I think I'm gonna.
Some of these
go ahead and try out.
I'm going to get into because they sound kind of awesome.
Especially that with Tone Gem thing with the producers. where you
Yeah.
produce for producers.
Yeah, that sounds
That's
fascinating.
big. That's really big.
Yeah.
So yeah,
All right,
go out, listen.
and get some good ears,
Yeah, get you some good ears, y'all.
and we'll see you next time.
We hope you found this episode useful. If you wish to support us financially, feel free to visit the donate page of our website, musicstudent101.com. You can also support us by writing a review or liking, subscribing, and sharing on social media. If you know of any good music apps you would like to share with our community or have any other questions or comments, write us at info@musicstudent101.com.